This is the story of a man who built a tech empire from a Detroit garage, only to be erased from it like he never existed. No name, no credit, no equity. They stole everything, but forgot one thing. He still had the backups. And in silence, he didn't just plan revenge, he rewrote the entire narrative. Line by line, deal by deal, until the company they stole began to rot from the inside out. This isn't a comeback, it's a reclamation. The smell of fresh paint still lingered in the halls of the new headquarters. Stark white walls, glass offices, sleek desks untouched by real work. It looked more like a showroom than the heart of a revolutionary tech firm. But it was mine. Or at least, it had been. Caldwell Systems was born in my garage on the east side of Detroit. I was 25, broke, and half mad with caffeine and conviction. I coded the first 3 products myself. I slept on a beanbag for 2 years. I pitched investors until my voice cracked and my eyes bled red from screen burn. I built it. And now, I was standing in the lobby like a stranger, watching my own company's logo being projected on the wall without my name underneath it. Just Caldwell Systems, innovation, precision, integrity. That last word made my teeth hurt. I swiped my badge, access denied. That was the first sting. By the time I got home, I couldn't access any company accounts. Email, disabled. Equity platform, locked. I called the lawyer who helped incorporate the company. He didn't answer. I called the accountant. Same. Then I saw the press release. Caldwell Systems announces new executive leadership. Founders Daniel Holt, Ashley Crane, and Marcus Levin will take company into the next era. My name wasn't even mentioned. Not in the release, not in the founding credits. I read it 3 times, certain I'd missed it. Nothing. They'd erased me. The phone rang. It was Marcus. "It's business, Alan," he said, his voice the same even tone he used when firing people. "Your contributions were valuable, but you know how perception works. Investors need focus, unity, a clean story. I started the company. No one cares who had the first line of code. They care who's at the helm now. I built the engine. You're just polishing the hood. Whatever helps you sleep, buddy." Then he hung up. That night, I drank. A lot. I screamed. Smashed a few things. But only after locking the mirrored drives away. I had copies of everything. Every expense report, every version control repo, every Slack message, every backdated contract, every deleted file. 2 years ago, when I first noticed the whispers after board meetings, I started backing up everything. I had no plan then, just a feeling. I'd trusted Marcus and Ashley once. I thought they were friends. We started in that garage together, but Daniel was new blood. He came with venture capital and smooth talk. And poison. I knew something was coming. I just didn't expect them to move all at once, and so cleanly. The next morning, I visited my lawyer's office in person, or rather tried. The office was cleared out, gone, his number disconnected. I visited the accountant next. The door had a new name on it. No one had heard of Calvin Wicks, my old accountant. They hadn't just erased me from the company, they erased me from the paper trail. A week later, I received the final insult, a registered letter, official confirmation of termination and transfer of equity holdings in accordance with the board's unanimous decision. Included was a document I'd never seen before, with my forged signature, assigning my shares to a dummy entity, legal on paper, illegal in reality. But they'd buried the reality under layers of false truth. That night, I opened the drives. Didn't scream this time. I smiled. It was all there. Emails showing Daniel rerouting funds from marketing to personal investments, spreadsheets with misreported numbers just before a funding round, a PDF contract between Ashley and a foreign tech firm for a product we hadn't even built yet, promising early access, fake names on invoices, ghost consultants, bribes. It was beautiful. In a sick, horrifying way. But this wasn't something I could just walk into the SEC with. They had lawyers. Power. If I walked into a courtroom, they'd drag me through mud until I looked like the crazy founder who lost his mind. I had to be patient. So I disappeared. I closed my social accounts, moved out of the city, bought a small place upstate under a new name. I told no one where I went. For 6 months, I studied. Not code this time, but poison. Not the literal kind. Not yet. I studied reputational sabotage, legal frameworks, corporate espionage laws, media manipulation. I made friends in dark places. I learned to be invisible. Then, when I was ready, I began testing the seams. I sent an anonymous tip to a mid-level journalist about a pattern of financial discrepancies in Caldwell's quarterly reports. I watched as it got picked up on Reddit. Nothing major, just whispers. Then I mailed a hard copy of one forged document to a board member's spouse. No return address. Just a sticky note. Ask your husband about the SATEC contract. 2 weeks later, that board member resigned to focus on family. The rest of them didn't notice. Or didn't care. It didn't want a war. Not yet. I wanted rot. Slow, silent, spreading. Next, I hacked into an old company archive through a vendor backdoor I'd coded years ago. I replaced a few innocuous design files with corrupted versions. No real damage, just cost them a few days. Just enough to sow doubt in the dev team. Then I leaked the Slack messages where Marcus bragged about cutting dead weight, referring to a dozen loyal staffers we'd let go after Series B, people who'd sacrificed weekends and birthdays for the company. The layoffs had been portrayed as strategic realignment. But I had the truth. The messages spread. A few employees quit, quietly. One wrote a blog post. Again, just enough smoke. I wasn't done. Next, I sent a copy of the financial fraud files to a competitor. I knew they'd never go public, but they'd use it. And they did. A month later, Caldwell lost a key contract after a rival swooped in with an offer that undercut them by exactly the margin Daniel had been skimming off. Daniel blamed procurement. Ashley blamed bad timing. Marcus started cutting departments. I watched. They were still standing, but swaying. Because I hadn't even touched the poison yet. 6 months after the first strike, Caldwell Systems was still breathing, but it was no longer invincible. The new headquarters no longer gleamed. The atrium was half lit now, a broken panel flickering every third night like a dying star. Staff turnover had hit an all-time high. Their culture and innovation officer was let go quietly after her internal survey went public on an anonymous forum, exposing a 47% burnout rate among developers and a near-no confidence rating in the executive team. The company was hemorrhaging morale. It was time to make them bleed something real. Targeted Daniel first. The crown prince. The face of the brand now. He'd always liked being the voice in every pitch, the smile on every press release. But behind that smile was greed, deep, incurable greed. Through a contact in Panama, I got copies of wire transfers he'd made years ago, back when we were still a startup, to an account listed under a shell company that owned no assets, served no clients, and existed only to absorb inflated marketing expenses. He thought he'd buried it. But I had it all. I didn't release it. I sent it directly to his wife, along with a photo of him and a junior account manager from a Vegas Tech Expo taken in a hotel hallway at 2 a.m. That was the first real crack. His wife filed for divorce 2 weeks later. But she didn't just leave. She took everything that wasn't nailed down and half of what was, including screenshots I'd provided that showed the purchase of a luxury condo in Belize, hidden, undeclared, and technically community property. Daniel stopped showing up to investor briefings, started drinking again. I knew because I'd paid a temp assistant to track every time he showed up late, disheveled, or smelling like gin. She uploaded the footage to a secure folder I accessed nightly. But the board began asking questions. That's when I moved on Ashley. She was harder, smarter, cleaner. Her crimes were done behind smoke and legalese. No flashy wire transfers, no lovers in hotel rooms. She wore everything like armor. Calculated, controlled. But even the cleanest armor has seams. I found hers in an old acquisition deal she'd overseen, back when we bought a struggling AI analytics firm called Neuron Metrics. On paper, it was a routine purchase, but the founder, a quiet, bright woman named Carol Chen, had been forced out under NDA after raising concerns that her proprietary model had been rebranded and passed off as Caldwell's internal IP. I met with Carol in person. She didn't want to talk at first. Too much fear. Too many legal threats. But when I showed her the original Slack logs between her and Ashley, the ones where Ashley instructed her to shut up and take the money, something broke in her. She gave me a flash drive. In it were design documents, time-stamped prototypes, even voice memos proving that what we'd called Caldwell Predict was hers, line for line, feature for feature. And the worst part? She'd tried to whistleblow to the FTC. But the letter she'd sent never reached them, because Ashley had paid off a compliance officer to intercept and destroy it. I released the voice memos anonymously to a journalist who'd been covering AI patent disputes. No names attached, just breadcrumbs. The story exploded within days. Ashley held a press conference, denied everything, claimed the recordings were fabricated. But the damage was done. Old employees came out of the woodwork. Quiet resignations began to pile up. Caldwell's stock dipped for the first time in a year. I wasn't done. Marcus had always been the quiet one. The knife behind the smile. His betrayal hurt most of all. We'd built this together. I'd covered his rent when he was broke, stayed up with him while his mother was dying. He was the one I'd trusted with the server keys. And he was the one who signed the papers that erased me. So I saved him for last. Unlike the others, Marcus was paranoid. He kept no paper trail. He destroyed drives like they were viruses. But paranoia makes you predictable. I set the bait with an email from a fake consultant, offering inside information on a potential acquisition target. I knew Marcus couldn't resist insider advantage. He replied within the hour. The next morning, he met my decoy in a hotel room downtown. The consultant was a former intelligence analyst I'd hired through a referral. Their meeting was recorded from 3 angles. Marcus admitted, casually, that he'd eliminated liabilities when taking over the company, including manipulating internal logs to show my signature on the equity transfer. That was my gold. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was confession. I sent that footage to 3 places: the press, the board, and a lawyer I trusted more than anyone, my sister. She'd walked away from law 5 years ago after getting tired of defending the soulless, but she came back for me. By the end of the week, the press had it. Founder ousted in secret coup, Caldwell executive caught admitting to fabricated transfer of equity. It was front-page news. Marcus vanished. His office cleared overnight. A whisper in the halls said he'd fled the country. Ashley tried to distance herself. Daniel denied knowledge of anything. The board froze the company's assets for audit. Stocks plummeted. But I wasn't watching the stock price. I was watching them unravel. Then came the poison. Not metaphor, not data, not lawsuits. Real poison. It started with Daniel's new girlfriend, the account manager from Vegas. She fell violently ill one morning after drinking from a bottle of imported mineral water Daniel had bought on a recent trip. Doctors were baffled. She survived. But barely. Then came a series of letters to the press, all signed anonymously, each detailing stories of shady offshore investments and threats made against junior staffers. None were traced back to me. All of them traced back to Daniel and Ashley. An intern found a vial of white powder in the women's restroom. The office went into lockdown. HR panicked. Security swept every floor. Then someone leaked an internal video of Daniel berating an engineer in the cafeteria, calling him a disposable coder. The video ended with the engineer collapsing from what looked like a panic attack. The poison was fear. He had turned their house into a haunted one. They began hiring crisis PR, then investigators, then lawyers. I was 10 steps ahead. Every time they reached for solid ground, I pulled it out from under them. Every contact they called was someone I had spoken to first. Every ally they thought they had was either neutral or mine. Their own silence began to bury them. Finally, the board made the call. They announced an internal investigation. Ashley resigned, Daniel issued a statement and disappeared. The stock hit an all-time low. Investors pulled out, contracts dissolved. The company went into what they called strategic restructuring. I called it death. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. The building was still standing. Caldwell Systems headquarters hadn't collapsed in flames or crumbled into dust like some Hollywood finale. No, it had taken on a quiet, rotting stillness. Half-empty parking lots, lights off in the upper floors, boardroom blinds pulled shut all day. But I wasn't interested in the structure. I wanted what was inside. The final piece wasn't about scandal. It wasn't about headlines or humiliations. It was about reclaiming what they stole. Not just my equity, my name, the patents, the credits. They'd rewritten history, scrubbed me like I was some ghost story whispered to interns as a cautionary tale. But history, like code, can be rewritten again. Especially if you have the original repository. I still had the drive. The one they didn't know existed. It contained everything. Not just proof of invention, but time-stamped commits to every major build. My design notes, audio logs, prototype videos with my voice explaining the logic behind the architecture, even photos of the whiteboards in my garage with markers bleeding through paper sheets taped to the walls. And I had something else. An old client. A quiet billionaire named Everett Klein. We'd done a custom security protocol for his data firm years ago. He trusted me. Owed me. He now owned a portfolio of shell companies and happened to control a large minority stake in Caldwell. I sent him the drive. No message. Just the truth. 3 days later he called. "This is real?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes." "And the signatures?" "Mine. The ones in the public filings? Forged." He went silent for a moment, then said, "Tell me what you want." "2 things," I replied. "My name back, and the chair at the next shareholder meeting." He made it happen. A week later, I walked into the same building that had once locked me out. No fanfare, no security call. Just the clean click of a badge that had never existed on their registry, one Everett had created for me himself. I wore black. No tie. No smile. People stared. Not everyone recognized me, but the ones who mattered did. Inside the boardroom, the air was stale. Ashley was gone. Daniel, if he was even in the country, had left no trace. Only Marcus remained on the call, a live video feed from what looked like a private villa. His beard was longer, his voice thinner. The meeting began. They introduced quarterly figures. Dismal. The interim CEO, some poor man they'd promoted too late, read through numbers with trembling hands. Then Everett interrupted. "There's someone here who'd like to speak." They turned toward me like ghosts, recognizing their unfinished business. He stood. "My name is Alan Reeve," I said. "I founded this company in a garage 9 years ago. I wrote the first line of code, designed the first product, closed the first client. My name was stripped, my equity was stolen, my patents were repackaged under someone else's identity. I placed the drive on the table. This contains every single line of proof. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. They knew." The board members exchanged looks. One of them, Patricia, the same woman who'd chaired the ethics subcommittee, looked visibly nauseous. "Due to the evidence presented," Everett said calmly, "I propose a special vote. 1, to reinstate Alan Reeve's equity and founding status. 2, to return full patent attribution. 3, to award damages in proportion to the time he was forcibly removed under false pretenses. The room went quiet. The vote passed. Unanimously. Marcus's screen turned off before they even finished counting. Later that day, I was walked to the executive suite. My name was already on the door. But I didn't sit down. I walked through the office, past the desks, past the eyes, past the curious looks and confused stares. I went to the break room, the same one where they'd once toasted their new era. I opened the fridge. The champagne was still there. I poured a glass, held it up, didn't drink. Just left it there. A week later, I began the final purge. Not with press or leaks, with silence. I removed every trace of their policies, terminated every contract they'd signed during their tenure, rebuilt the architecture of our core products from the ground up. Every line of code they'd introduced was deleted, every strategic shift undone. No trace of their era remained. I fired every executive who'd known and stayed silent. Offered IT staffers we'd once laid off. Offered them better pay, better roles, apologies face-to-face. Some accepted, others didn't. I respected both. By the end of the month, the company was mine again. But it wasn't the same. And neither was I. Because in the shadows of victory, something darker remained. They'd taken more than a company. They'd taken time, years I would never get back. POPL. I'd trusted parts of myself I'd killed to stay sane. So I did one last thing. I gathered every copy of the old logo, every document with their signatures, every photo, every relic of their time in charge, and I burned them. At night. Alone. In a steel barrel behind the building. No press, no drama, just ash. And I stood there watching the smoke rise and smiled. A poison hadn't just infected them, it had purified me. 6 months after I burned their legacy to ash, Caldwell Systems stood reborn. We didn't announce it with fireworks or a glossy rebranding campaign. There were no vanity interviews or smug press releases, just a quiet change to the website's footer where my name was finally restored. Founder and chief architect Alan Reeve. I didn't need anything else. In that silence, I rebuilt. But not everything. Some things I'd left buried. The walls of my new office were bare. No plaques, no awards, no framed headlines. Just a whiteboard and an old photograph from the garage days, faded and sun-bleached, taken before everything turned. I had it framed not because of nostalgia, but because of what it reminded me who I was before the betrayal, who I had to become to survive it. The people who once filled that frame, gone. Marcus was off the grid. Some said Argentina, others said the Philippines. Ashley had resurfaced under a new consultancy brand, catering to startups foolish enough to believe in reinvention through lies. Daniel tried to start a podcast about resilience and was laughed off the internet after someone leaked an audio clip of him ranting at an assistant for using the wrong damn oat milk. None of them came back. None of them could. Their reputations were beyond salvage. Because I hadn't just exposed them. I erased them. Every public record now reflected the truth, my name restored to every patent, my contributions correctly listed, their names scrubbed, relegated to buried legal documents and forgotten articles. A few tech blogs ran follow-ups. The Ghost founder returns, but they didn't understand. This wasn't about return. This was reclamation. The poison I'd released wasn't just in the servers or the financials or the headlines. It was in the silence between their lies. It was the fear they now lived with, that someone out there had the proof, that someone could always come back. But I didn't chase them. That was the beauty of it. They would spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, while I moved forward. Caldwell began to shift focus. I dismantled the departments they'd built around marketing fluff and buzzwords. We returned to product, to precision, Hired people who didn't care about stock prices or flash, just function. I gave the company back its soul. But something in me stayed colder, more methodical. Every new hire went through background checks twice as deep. Every department head reported directly to me. I didn't trust easily. Couldn't. The ones who proved themselves stayed. The ones who played games didn't last. Some called me paranoid. Let them. The only thing worse than betrayal is not learning from it. I stopped giving interviews. No more panels, no more public talks. The world had already heard my voice. Now it was time they saw what I could build when no one was whispering behind closed doors. One afternoon, late in winter, I returned to the old garage. It was still there, still cold, still cramped, still mine. I stood at the entrance, hands in my pockets, staring at the concrete floor where it had all started. I remembered the wires, the solder burns on my fingers, the late nights tracing bugs through sleepless haze. I remembered the smell of ozone from a fried motherboard, the panic, the rush. I walked to the corner, where the first whiteboard had once hung. In its place now, just blank wall. I pressed my hand against it. Solid. No code there anymore, but something lingered. Something honest. It was the one place their shadows had never touched. I stayed there for hours, saying nothing. Just listening, not for sounds, for silence, for peace. When I finally stepped out into the night, the sky was dark and clean. Snow fell in thin sheets, quiet and soft, dusting the cracked pavement, like the world was offering a blank slate. I didn't need vengeance anymore. I'd taken it. I didn't need forgiveness. I hadn't asked for it. What I needed, what I'd earned, was this. A quiet end, not to the story, but to the part where I was the victim. They thought I couldn't fight back. They thought erasing my name, locking my accounts, and stealing my work would bury me under silence. What they didn't know was that silence is where I do my best work. And now they live in the noise. And I live in the proof.